Hello and welcome to an episode of Cardinal Conversations, something a bit different for you today. Where we're going to be looking back at the top three games of different Woking supporters, players, anyone that's connected with the club. And today, for our very first episode on this, we are delighted to be joined by Ben Fletcher. Talksport listeners will be very familiar with Ben, as will people on social media and stuff, where he flies the flag for Woking. So that's nice. Ben, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jacob. Real privilege. Nice to talk to you.
Now, before we dive back into these kind of three games that are going to be your pick for your top three, I think you were at the game at the weekend, the 2-1 victory, kind of crucial victory over Braintree. So how did you kind of see that game? Obviously, it was probably quite nervy. When we went 2-0 up, everyone was probably ecstatic, and then it was very nervy right near the end.
Exactly that. I think we went into the game knowing that a draw wouldn't do. We've had many draws this season, and whilst every point is important, to use a well-worn cliche, it had to be a win. At 2-0, I didn't really see Braintree getting back into it. But of course, 75 or 76 minutes, whatever it was, they get that goal back. And yeah, it was the longest 14, 15, 20 minutes of my life. But we showed grit, we showed determination. The new signing, Adoji, is it? Absolutely brilliant. I know there were some concerns about him coming up from the lower leagues, #United, but he didn't look out of place. He tracked back. He looked to make good on some of his errors when he lost the ball. Good pace. The Sonic the Hedgehog image on the club's Twitter wasn't misplaced on that occasion. And yeah, a really, really important 3 points. We showed grit when we had to. 1 or 2 results below us didn't quite go our way. Been the story of the season, I think, with teams below us just picking up form at the same time that we do. But a win's a win. We go forward, and yeah, Rochdale, we'll see.
Yeah, certainly feel well. The pressure's not off for tomorrow, but yeah, you might take a point or something like that. But you're right, actually, it's good to point about the kind of time you were saying. Is it seems that every time we're ahead in a game, there's like another tenth of the game added on. I think there were 7 minutes added on at the weekend. And there's a game recently, I can't remember which one it was. It might have been Barnet actually, or maybe it was the Halifax game. And we needed a goal, and it was like 3-4 minutes added on. And whenever we're ahead, it's like, I think it was 7 on Saturday. Last year's running was crazy. I think that Gateshead game, it was like 15 minutes added on or something, and it was just like, oh my god, like this is crazy. But as you say, hung on in the end, and that's all that matters, thankfully. And we actually have one of your 3 games. I won't spoil the surprises, but one of them is a season where we stayed up on the last day. So hopefully we can we can sort it out before that happens this season. Now with this format, so obviously you've got 3 games to pick. Your kind of top 3 games. As a Woking fan, are the 3 that meant the most to you, or the most memorable games, or however you want to do it, really. But I guess it's probably good to go in chronological order. If you have got an order of the 3, I guess we could start off with your number 3 and work through to number 1.
So we'll start with the earliest then and work our way up to the current day. The very, very first game was the 18th of May, 1997, and it was the 3rd and final FA Trophy win that we had at the old Wembley. Woking 1, Dagenham and Redbridge 0. My first time at Wembley. It was the end of my first season going to Woking games as a supporter, and it was just pure magic. When you asked me to put these 3 games together, I was absolutely gonna. I could have picked 3 games from that season. I could have had my first game, the 2-2 draw with Bath City, 2 late goals from Rob Jones and Steve Thompson. I could have had any of the FA Cup games. I could have had Coventry away. But I just think, just for the pure magic of an FA Trophy win at Old Wembley, champagne supernova in the sunshine afterwards, Shane White coming up and greeting supporters at the end of it, and saying, you know, safe journey home, and chatting with the players and how starstruck I was as a 12-year-old. It was just so special. And, you know, as a 12, 13-year-old who was maybe a little bit of a late bloomer when it came to football, I didn't really get into it till I was maybe in secondary school. To have an opportunity and go and watch the team at the end of my parents' road effectively win a game at Wembley, where the day before Chelsea had beaten Middlesbrough in the FA Cup 2-0, and Roberto Di Matteo had scored that amazing goal against Ben Roberts. It was so special. We painted our faces red and white. We were playing in yellow on the day, so it was a little bit of a colour clash aesthetically. Red and white faces, yellow tops. I don't remember much of the game. I do remember Darren Hay's goal. It was in like the 98th minute or something. It was goalless after 90 minutes. Darren Hay almost scored an absolute screamer, and as a corner, and he scored a header from that resulting corner. And it was just pure elation. And I remember thinking at that point, I mean, how little we knew then, but I just thought, wow, like, we are on the verge of the Football League in a 1-up, 1-down Vauxhall Conference. Woking, we are the next cab off the rank, no doubt in my mind whatsoever. We had a great team. We had a great manager. Clive Walker might have stayed for one more season, didn't in the end. And it was just, if I could bottle that moment, being in the May sunshine, looking back up at 20,000 Woking fans, flags, jerseys, you name it, singing Champagne Supernova, pure magic. And as I say, it just capped off my first season going to Kingfield, and there were so many memories, and for it to end like that was just special. It's what football's all about. You can talk to the cows come home about supporting Premier League clubs and wanting to be in the top league for the sake of being in the top league. How top fours maybe become a bit of a trophy for some clubs, but the sheer unadulterated joy to win something at Wembley, old Wembley, was just absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah, one of many wins in the 90s. But as you say, that a lot of people were kind of either too young to remember those, or kind of only remember one because they were kind of growing up at the time. So it's a special memory to have, certainly. And I think, like, looking at that day as well, I think that was on where Pele walked the teams out, which again is a great, like, I don't even know what the modern day equivalent would be, because I know obviously he was retired by that, but it's just insane to look back at stuff like that. And that was just the kind of razzmatazz, I guess, of the trophy. It lost its the star-studdedness, I guess, a little bit. Although, obviously, if we get to the final this year, obviously we'll say it's back again. But there are certainly a lot of things that day that seem really cool, and obviously there's a lot of history kind of in the 90s, and that, as you say, that cup run as well in the FA Cup that year was obviously really memorable. The thing, I guess, always with the FA Cup is it's a little bit like Woking obviously never going to win it. Premier League teams normally win it. A push a championship side maybe could, like we saw in the kind of in the League Cup. You certainly see a few teams that are lower down go quite a long way. I think Bradford had a good run years ago now, but that does seem, obviously you're going to go out eventually in the FA Cup, and then when you play a team that's good enough, it's kind of inevitable, but the kind of runs over. But with this one, you actually get to lift the trophy, and we've not been back since. I know we had the game at West Ham against Grays, but obviously
Horrible
still.
day.
Yeah, it's and I think the very next year it was back at Wembley, so it was kind of bittersweet, I guess, because we've maintained our unbeaten run at Wembley, but it meant we couldn't go that year, and then I think Ebbsfleet maybe won it the year after that. So, but no, that's a very good pick. And actually, funny enough, I was looking on the Wikipedia, and it says you were talking about, are we going to be the next club and going up to the Football League even harder than it is now, and it's still hard now. But I think it said that when the management team had left after that, this was the beginning of a less successful period for the club, which I guess feels a bit like an understatement, because we didn't really reach those heights ever again. And I know obviously the Jeff Chappell kind of, as we're speaking, the Jeff Chappell kind of celebration evening was last week, which again shows how many years later that's still kind of fondly looked at. So it's definitely, I think, a very worthy pick, and again, maybe hopefully something we can recreate.
Absolutely. You mentioned Pele. Where we were actually sat on the day, we were just above the dugouts. We had really, really great seats. Centre of the pitch, weren't particularly high. And everyone was absolutely shocked when Pele came out. I think it was Pele, Gordon Banks, and the then head of the FA, a guy called Graham Kelly, who, if you don't remember him, wasn't particularly popular, a bit of a suit. No one was really bothered by him. But Pele came out, and my dad was shocked. So I went with my dad, my brother, and some neighbours. Everyone was like, wow, Pele, unbelievable. And somebody next to me shouted, Pele, and they took a picture with an old instant camera. And because this guy was next to me, when he turned and blew a kiss at the camera, it was like he was blowing a kiss directly at me, because I was stood next to him. And I remember thinking at the time, I'm going to bank that. That's one of those things that's never going to happen to me again. Pele effectively blew a kiss at me. I mean, I don't think it was aimed at me, but, it looked that way for sure. And you're right. I mean, the FA Cup certainly is one of those tournaments. It's a revenue generator, isn't it? I mean, the Coventry game could have been one of my three, either the 1-1 draw at Highfield Road, or the replay. I've queued in my school uniform for 4.5 hours to get a ticket on a freezing cold January evening. And again, starstruck. Wow, Steve Grizovic playing at Kingfield. Gary McAllister, Gordon Strachan, Noel Whelan, all these like Premier League players that were in my sticker book, or Premiership as it was then. It's one of those things that you just we did come close to beating them, to be fair, at Kingfield. We didn't in the end, obviously, but just those memories that you think, wow, that's going to stay with me for a lifetime. No, we're not going to win the FA Cup, but we made a load of money. I think we probably went on to waste it in subsequent years, but yeah, huge wonderful memories, and that season was absolutely full of them.
Yeah, no, definitely. I actually recently brought the programs for the home and away obviously, I say home and away legs. Obviously, it's not two-legged, but there was a replay, which now don't exist anymore in certain rounds of the FA Cup. But I kind of brought those just to kind of have as a memento, as such a kind of brilliant occasion that it was, and those kind of things I guess will be lost over time. So it's good to restore those. I did go to both of those games, but I remember the only thing, I was far too young. I don't really remember too much of it, but I remember the Coventry one got called off a few times, and then eventually got played. But I remember we were at the ground for that game, and I remember I overheard a conversation. I mean, I was like 6 years old or something. I said, "Oh, Dad, I just heard the game's been called off." He's like, "Nonsense, that's a load of rubbish," and then it was. So should definitely listen to me in the future. But it's right, actually. I was thinking when we do this series, I'm sure, hopefully, we'll speak to probably some of the team that played in the game against Watford. But it's interesting because all the fans flood down for the Watford game, but you just know you're never going to win it. And 2-0 was a good result for us really on the day. But it's weird, isn't it? As you say, it is a revenue generator. But the kind of people that just turn up for that game, they've kind of missed the exciting bit, which was probably beating Swindon away, and the excitement and the build up to the Watford game. But the game itself, I always think that with the FA Cup, the game where everyone turns up. So
of course.
You've kind of missed a bit before, which is what like fans that go every week would get that. So I guess that's kind of what it's for. But you kind of turn up on the day and be like, well, we're just going to watch Woking lose today, but the cameras are there and it's all a bit of fun, I guess.
Yeah, and the frustrating thing as well is like those 5,000 fans or however many went to Watford. I did go to that Watford game, and I'll tell you a story about Troy Deeney, who I work with occasionally at Talksport Towers. The frustrating thing is, like, where were they the next Tuesday night at home to Eastleigh? Where were they the following Saturday against Chippenham Town or whoever it would have been in that bonkers National League South season that we had under Alan Dowson? But yeah, Troy Deeney, I always love reminding him when I see him at Talksport Towers. And he has fond memories of coming to Woking. They're lovely. He's an absolute gent, scored one of the greatest goals in Championship history against Leicester way back when, probably 2018, 2019, maybe even earlier than that, actually. And he's got fond memories of coming to Woking, loved the banter with the fans. But I always remember I was on the KRE, and as he was strolling towards the goal in the sort of pre-match warm-up, if you like, the KRE in full voice, "You fat, you know what?" And the goalkeeper was behind him, leading the cheering, sort of egging the crowd on, going, "Yeah, you give it to him, go on." And I always remember that. And he was a really, really good sport, Troy Dean. He always, I mention that game to him periodically. And he always asked how we're doing. And he was a really good sport that day. Shame he got on the score sheet, but given the stick that he got, it was probably no less than he deserved.
Yeah, we spoke to Ben Gehring a couple of years ago on an episode, and because he rung into 5 Live, spoke to him the kind of week before the game, and I think he says he was going to boot him into the stand, and then in the end, Deeney just popped in front of him and scored a goal. So it was everything was corrected eventually. So but no, it was good fun. I know the managers kind of swapping drinks after the game and stuff like that, and it was good. Obviously, Watford went to the final that year, which was a brilliant run for them. So pretty cool. Well, we'll move on to your second pick for your top 3.
100%. Off the top of my head, it was the 26th of April 2003, and it was Woking 3, Telford 0 under Glenn Cockrell. One of the most stressful games I think I've ever been to. My third and final pick was pretty hairy, but I think from an existential point of view, Woking 3, Telford 0 was just absolutely terrifying. Chris Ingram had come in at the start of the season. We actually started the season very well under Jeff Chappell. Everyone remembers Black September. The club slid towards relegation. He left the club. Glenn Cockrell took over as manager. But we got to the Telford game, I think on the back of something ridiculous like 9 draws back-to-back, which kept us alive, but still needing favours. And it's funny how it was 2 of our nearest and dearest rivals that actually gave us those favours in the end, Stevenage and Farnborough, to keep us in the division. Their results, coupled with ours, kept us up. But I think it was probably the first Woking game that I really appreciated as a grown-up. I went to university in the summer of 2002, and the game before I left, I might have been like a defeat to Northwich Victoria, something like that. Didn't get too many games after that. Always kept an eye on it. But going to Woking Telford in the sunshine, absolutely packed. Had a couple in the bar beforehand, I won't lie to you. Maybe at half-time and plenty of full-time as well. But I just remember thinking like, wow, again, during the game, just the noise, the passion, the excitement. There's been a goal at Nuneaton, those iconic words. The favour had been done by Farnborough. And it was just, it was... I guess on the one hand, it was just delight that we were still going to exist as a football club. It was delight that we were staying up. I'd never seen our club relegated. But there was a real feeling, and around that time I got into Cardsport, or as it was then, Cardweb, and I remember sort of thinking, what's all this about, this online fans forum? And there was a lot of talk of, the club could be in big trouble if it goes down. You remember back in the late 90s, Carlisle and Scarborough, they effectively had a relegation death match. Carlisle stayed up by way of that Jimmy Glass goal. Scarborough went down to the conference as it was then, and they never survived. So the idea of Woking dropping out the league and going Bob really was quite a terrifying and real possibility. So my memories of the game itself, for reasons given previously owing to the Cardinals bar, are a little bit hazy, but I seem to remember it being pretty much sewn up from our end at half-time. I think we were 2-0 up. I remember Scott Cannon getting a goal, Amos Foyer were maybe, and I seem to remember thinking at our end, we're looking good. And then it was just the other results elsewhere, which soon came in, and then we stayed up. Pitch invasion, really, really well-natured. And again, all the players and management absolutely delighted that we'd stayed up, and we got to survive. But it was the first game, as I said, that I really remember being like a grown-up, and again, discovering the forums, really sort of seeing the social side of the club. It wasn't just somewhere that I went with my dad, sat in the stand and went home again. It was somewhere where I could go and build friendships and meet new people and nod at people who I've never met, don't know their name, but I've done so for 25 years and I still will. Know nothing about their lives, they know nothing about mine, but they're special people that you see at the football and whatnot. And it's incredible to think we've been relegated since, obviously, and the club has bounced back. We've had some hairy moments. We've had new investment. We've had no investment. There's been lots of twists and turns from a financial point of view over the years, but I just remember that game being like, wow, this really could be it. And thank God it wasn't.
Yeah, as you say, that's kind of the first time that really happened. Even in years following that, I kind of used to go to games as a kid, not even really thinking that it was possible that we could be relegated, because the worst we would do is kind of like mid-table, and that was about it. So it's it's a crazy thing. And actually, if you go through the programs, this is becoming a running theme on this thing. Yes, I collect and keep some of the old programs and just flick through them. Like, it's not even really a collection. They will sit in a box somewhere and they're not even nicely presented, but sometimes you'll just go through them and see what's going on at the time. And but looking at the league tables is certainly one thing that's interesting, because like 90% of the table, it's either like teams that have really moved through the leagues and gone upwards, but there's not many of those, but the other half don't exist anymore, or they exist under a slightly different name. So your Farnboroughs and that, and you're just thinking, we've just kind of always been there, which, we've not gone crazy forwards, we've not gone crazy backwards, we've dropped down one league and then come back again. But that time, as you say, with the kind of financial constraints and issues like that, it kind of makes it a lot bigger. And I guess now it's completely different, right? Because we've had games that have gone down to the final day, A, for us to get into the playoffs, but B, also to stay up. But I guess it's completely different now for the nature of, as you say, I guess people would have had radios and stuff kind of in the crowd.
Yeah, and I worked at BBC Southern Counties Radio, then BBC Surrey for a number of years, and I remember saying to the editor, Tim Durran's, like, where is that audio? Like, that audio must exist. There's been a goal at Nuneaton. But it just doesn't, because back then things weren't taped digitally as they are now. I won't go full radio geek on you, I promise, but it's such a shame that it's such an iconic moment. And I bought the book. I've got the book somewhere, Cards on the Table, which came out, I think might even have been that Christmas, talking about Woking's conference years. And that has become such an iconic moment for those that were there, those that heard it. Our rivals did us that huge favour and stayed up. You talk about matchday programmes. I've got a box full as well, somewhere, from a number of games. My first ever, 96, 97, I think I've got practically all of them. Even the 1-0 win over Kuwait in an international friendly, which I must have been there because I've got the programme, but I have absolutely no recollection of it. And it's such a shame that they don't exist anymore. Like, my two young sons, 8 and 6, they're season ticket holders like me. They come to games and they can't get paper programmes anymore. It's not quite the same getting it on the laptop. I understand why the club's done it, so this isn't a kind of having a dig at them. I know many clubs have gone the same way, but they've got their old programmes from a couple of seasons ago, and when I sort of put them to bed, I'll look, and at the end of the bed there'll be, I don't know, a win from under Darren Sarll, or maybe one of the old Douse programmes. And they just love flicking through them. And the further back you go as well, they almost become like historical artefacts. In 1996, who was in the Panto at the New Victoria Theatre? There's adverts for Fantails nightclub. All these like old businesses that just aren't there anymore, and it really is just like a lovely little portal. And the editorials, people like Paul Beard, and others who sadly are no longer with us, perhaps. Just giving an honest account of the way things were. There'll be another. I won't go into it now because I know we haven't got a huge amount of time. But Wobble You, the fanzine, as well as the matchday program, the unofficial fanzines will work a genius. And I've got a couple of copies of Wobble You somewhere, and they always make me laugh. If I'm ever having to clear out and find it, I think I strategically place them in the hope that I'll find them. And I can just sort of spend 5 minutes going down memory lane, But whoever, Simon Bell, I think it may have been, never met the guy, but comedy genius. I'd say bring it back, but in a digital world, that's probably a little bit too optimistic.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? You're right. It's a real moment in time. It's like a snapshot of what it was like in whatever month, in whatever year. And some of them, yeah, it's crazy. Some of the stuff you even find that kind of related to kind of other events, other world events that have gone on. You'll see stuff, and I guess from our lifetime, you'll see stuff. Probably it'll be the same way that people look back at the COVID seasons and stuff like that, and be like, well, that was bizarre. And it's starting to get like that now, where people kind of look back 5 years later, but in 10, 15, 20 years time, people will be like, what? All of this stuff happened and things got cancelled and the seasons, you played behind closed doors and all of that. I mean, it just gets forgotten. And I guess with videos and photos and stuff, there is stuff. But as we found with, websites and stuff like that, it's all fine having stuff online and in a place. But if that website gets taken down, deleted, whatever, it's gone then, and then you've got nothing. Whereas the program's in a box, very safe, so we'll keep collecting them and go for that. And actually, just the second point is that your kind of rite of passage thing. I think that's a really nice thing for all kind of football sports, which a lot of people will probably kind of resonate with. I know certainly I used to go every week with either my dad or my granddad and sit in the LGS. Yeah. We'd still know the same seats that we went in all the time if I went there now, and then actually some people from school start going and you go less with your family and more with them, and then as you grow up it kind of things all change, and it's quite a nice journey for people that stick it out anyway, and don't just do a couple of seasons and then go and find another club or another hobby to do. So definitely resonate with that. And one, I guess your number one, as it would be, is a more recent game.
It is indeed, and I always thought it was a Saturday, but I just double checked one or two things before I spoke to you this evening, and it turns out it was a Sunday, according to the club website. May 2019, Woking 3, Wealdstone 2, the National League South playoff semi-final. I think it's the most bonkers game of football I've ever seen. I've seen Germany beat Brazil 7-1 at the 2014 World Cup, not in the flesh. I've seen lots of mental things happen in football. But Woking 3, Wealdstone 2 was just an absolute Tasmanian devil of a game. And it was that sort of season, really. I remember when Anthony Limbrick left the club, where we got relegated under Jason Goodlife, and everyone was kind of a little bit down in the doldrums. There was talk that Alan Dowson was going to make the move from Hampton and Richmond Borough. And in one of those weird, I've got a really weird memory when it comes to like numbers and stats and where I was and what I was doing. I was on holiday in Brixham with my wife and my then 11-month-old. She was pregnant with our second, and somebody texted me and said, "Oh, Alan Dowson has become manager." And we were in our like chalet or whatever it was, and I just remember thinking, "That's great, that's amazing." He'd have been my pick. Great non-league manager, came to the club with such optimism. He gave us a really, really fun season, and I think the disappointment perhaps that season was that Torquay just pipped us to it. For so long, we led the National League South. I think it might even have been Billericay Town at one point with the main rivals, and Torquay seemed to come from nowhere. And there was that 3-3 draw towards the end of the season, which I think they were ahead of us by that point. But the 3-3 draw really just sort of ended it. I think they would have been 6-7 points clear maybe by that point. And any suggestion we were going to win the title automatically had gone. But my view at the time was, well, at least we know we can concentrate on the playoffs. We'll have to do it the hard way, but we hadn't had playoff success before at that point, but we got experience of being in playoffs. So fast forward to what was, I remember, a disappointing end of the season. I think we did what we had to do to finish second, but a couple of defeats, perhaps because Dowse was resting players. And then we get to Wealdstone, and it all went a bit pear-shaped rather quickly, didn't it? I remember being in the KRE in the first half. Again, I'd been in the Cardinals bar for quite some time before kick-off, so my memory is slightly hazy, a running theme. But I just remember two silly goals up the other end. One of them I seem to remember was an unmarked header. And then the other goal went through Craig Ross's legs. And I remember thinking at 2-0 down at half-time, like, goodness me, this doesn't look particularly good. We're supposed to be the home team. We're supposed to have the advantage of finishing second. Wealdstone only got into the playoffs, if I recall correctly, on the very last game of the season. They sort of snuck in and can't lose to this lot. back to the bar, a little bit more liquid optimism, and back out again. And then the game just completely changed. And I seem to remember lots of people tell me it was Kane Ferdinand coming on that changed the game. But for me, it was Paul Hodges, because Paul Hodges set up the third and final goal, which Jake Hyde sent home. And it was just 50 minutes. I said to Douse, I was quite close with Douse at that point, and I'd sort of have a beer with him before the game sometimes. We sort of texted a little bit, and he came up and saw Talksport Towers. I showed him and some members of the board round, and we had a drink before the game. And anyway, I said to him afterwards, that is the most bonkers 15 minutes of football I've ever seen in my life. We were down and out. We beat them 3-2. You can imagine the chance, 2-0, and you messed it up from Kingfield. And it was just probably the most exciting Woking game. I know I mentioned Woking Telford being exciting, terrifying, the huge release of emotion at the end because we'd stayed up and survived. It looked like we'd probably survive as a club. But Woking Millstones had everything, to go down, to come back, to win, for it to be like an injury time winner. The fact that Jake Hyde's goal was just ever so slightly crazy as well. Was it offside? He sort of tips it past the goalkeeper. It was just everything that I love about the club. It didn't really make any sense. We probably didn't deserve it, apart if you go by the whole 90 minutes. But Wealdstone were the better team for much of it. And I don't remember us really doing anything in the first half at all. But then it was those 15 minutes that counted. Douse made the right substitutions. Ferdinand came on. Paul Hodges, little Paul Hodges came on, looped it over. I think Kretschmar gets a header down to Jake Hyde, who then lifts it over the goalkeeper, 3-2, probably your father's brother. And then we go up back into the National League after beating Welling. So a superb game. And also, you mentioned COVID just now. I think I think the reason it means so much as well is it was one of the last games. Well, it was one of the last games we had in a full season before COVID came along. I mean, in May 2019, we then went into the COVID hit season, which obviously ended in March the following year. And I just look back at that. It's almost like BC AD. Do you know what I mean? Kind of, we had life after COVID and life before COVID. And I just remember that day being so golden and the kind of rose-tinted glow of everything. And that's not the Cardinal goal talking. And it was just lovely. And it really gave us a springboard. The Welling game, by contrast, was absolutely useless. I think we got a free kick. It was scored, I can't remember if it was a scored free kick now.
Marnie Little, I think, scored the...
It was Marnie Little, yeah. You're quite right. And then everyone was like, oh, that's done then, because Welling aren't going to score, because they don't score many goals. But yeah, Woking through, Wealdstone too. But my kids actually refer to it. They weren't even, one of them was a baby, one of them would have been 2, but we talk about it as the bonkers game. And I show them highlights occasionally, and I just said, this is why I take you to all these games. This is why I drag you along, because they're the moments that you sort of long for, that you live for, and you'll get them, and they've had them at various games, like the 3-2 win over Hartlepool, beating Darren Sarl earlier this season. That was pretty special. But yeah, beating Wealdstone in the National League South, and I was just pleased for Douse, because I think, had we been knocked out and had we not gone up at the first time of asking, well, the following season, obviously, who would have known COVID would have hit? I think we eventually would have found our way back. But for him to have broken that duck, of never been promoted from that league, of having failed with Hampton and Richmond, for him to do it, for him to achieve that as a manager, such a great bloke, did lots for the club. I know he wasn't everybody's cup of tea in the end, but everything about it just felt right. And I think you look at the video highlights, and there's a shot of him kind of going a bit like, oh, at the end, as if to say that was a bit fortunate. But hey, he knew what he was doing all along, right?
Yeah, exactly. As you say, the subs were perfect on that day, and obviously the format of the playoffs had only just changed at that stage, where Wealdstone had then played, I think Bath it was earlier in the week, and that had obviously been quite a tough game, and it's just minutes in the legs, and they just obviously it all just ran out after 75 minutes. But there's always been this thing, and people say it about their own club all the time, but I always thought that every time we pulled a big crowd at Kingfield, we underperformed and just underdelivered. And it did used to annoy me. Obviously, we were talking earlier about the people that turn up to like random one-off games and they won't be seen again till the next season. But it always just kind of get me, because it was like people that have come along, they're not going to come back now, because they're like, I spent 15 whatever it was quid back then probably on it. It's not been very entertaining, very enjoyable. And then they'll miss the game that is good a few weeks later, which is in front of much less people. But that kind of playoff campaign was obviously 2 games at home, big crowds. But you're right, after 10 minutes or whatever it was, I was like, well, here we go again. This is it. Yeah. It's all falling apart in front of a crowd. And people talk about must-win games all the time. Well, the playoffs, it's like, you win or you're out. It's real knockout stuff. So it's kind of terrifying. Was there any point? Obviously, the 3 goals really did come so quickly in the end. But was there any point where you felt the tide turn and thought we've kind of got them here? I guess maybe after the equaliser.
I think the first goal, I think Diarra's goal, again, I think it was a header. My memory of it sideways on from Mona's corner, slightly affected for reasons given previously. But I just thought, we're surely going to score. Like, surely, we're the fitter team. I can't remember if we were fully pro at that point, but I felt like we were probably the more experienced team. Surely we're going to get one. And then if we get one, their backs will be up, and then we'll get another. So obviously at 2-2, I actually messaged my wife and I said, I'm going to be a bit later tonight. It's going to go to extra time. And then, of course, the winner went in and I was late anyway, but for different reasons. But I thought once that first goal went in, you felt the mood in the stadium change. And, being down on Mona's, it's a rare thing that you hear a roar from the LGS. I sit at the back of the LGS these days with my 2 kids, my dad and my brother. And we're the ones trying to make noise. You get the cricket fans tutting us for trying to make bang on the backboards. And even for there to be a roar on that day, you think, wow, even the kind of the fair weathers, if you like, are getting behind the team and really getting passionate. So maybe when the first goal went in, and then I think Wealdstone were just so stunned. The second goal went in, Kretschmar. And then obviously the winner, the Jake Hyde goal, just finished them off. They did have a chance towards the end, if I recall correctly. It was booted into the Snooker Club car park. But I just thought even at 3-2, it would be so woking for us to concede an equaliser and go to extra time anyway. But yeah, relief when the final whistle went. And I don't recall there being a pitch invasion. There may have been. But I just remember it being great. Everyone in the bar afterwards, great scenes. And there was a real feeling that we'd done the hard work. We'd done the hard yards. That felt like the final, beating Wealdstone. And whilst Welling weren't to be underestimated, I just thought, yeah, if we can do that against them, Welling, I think we'd beaten them previously that season, and they weren't renowned for scoring huge amounts of goals. So as soon as that Armani little free kick went in, I was like, yeah, well, that's it, we're up then. And it felt like a bit of an anticlimax. But the Wealdstone game, that first goal, I think, was the real turned the tide. And at that point, in any game of football, how many times have you been at Kingford? Like the Braintree, it could have gone the other way. The Braintree game Saturday. They get that goal back. Our backs are up all of a sudden. We know we need the win. They're not really playing for anything, but we held on. We showed grit, and it was exactly the same against Wealdstone.
It's one of those examples as well, and earlier you mentioned kind of the Deeney goal, which people will remember, but they went on to lose. Actually, I think people, not obviously Watford fans or anyone that probably knows the Championship and stuff like that, but I think people probably assume that's when they actually got promoted to the Championship, and they didn't. They actually lost, I think, in the final that year.
They did. Palace.
Yeah, exactly. And Palace have never looked back themselves, I guess. And then Watford went up maybe the next season, or however it worked out in the end. And I guess for us, it was kind of similar. Obviously, we won the playoffs, so it's fine. But I think if you ask people, what was the memorable game in that run, it was really that game and not the final. But I think there was so much confidence, as you say, that when we scored that one goal. Looking back at the highlights of the Welling game, Welling had a few good chances. They hit the post, and there's a whole load of stuff going on, but we saw it out. And I guess really that team was just so much better than the teams we were playing, even in the playoff stage. Torquay were obviously a good team, and it was just the two of us really. But I mean, you look at the Conference South this season, and it's like a 7-horse race or something, and they're all really tight, so you wouldn't want to be a part of it. But yeah, I mean, I guess even that, the kind of Welling game, you're looking at the players we've got and the players you've got, and Dowse has got to take a lot of credit for that. We signed about 300 players that season, so we were going to get an 11 that worked at some stage. But even players like Hyde and Kretschmar and all these other Armani Little, as you mentioned earlier, and just some of the names in there that you're like, there's no way those guys probably should have been at that level, but for one reason or another, Craig Ross, I guess, was probably playing at that stage as well, and players that have just gone on to have careers in the league above or even in the Football League, were just kind of at that level for that at that moment in time, and for Dowse, I mean, he'll probably see it as a moment in time as well, as you mentioned earlier, because that probably was that season. Obviously, the cup run, which he'd never had a cup run, I think that's kind of part of his thing. And then we got one, and obviously it went really well, brilliantly with what we got there. And then the playoffs as well, which is quite a nice way to round it off, really. Obviously, we talked about the Watford game earlier, but there's no amazing outcome to that. Obviously, Swindon was a brilliant day out, but then, Watford were going to lose, whatever. But the playoffs, it kind of gone much better. And it was on a Sunday, actually, I think, but I think that might have been a bank holiday. And then the final wasn't a bank holiday. So the game kind of ended at 4 or 5 p.m. on a Sunday, and it was like, cool, but well, I've got work tomorrow, so the Cardinals bar,
Yeah.
which this isn't sponsored by the Cardinals bar either, even though it's taking a lot of your money. But yeah, that was kind of a bit of okay, well, we won it, but the excitement was just so much more in that game before, and that's why I think people will remember it. And I think the club even, and I don't know if it exists online still, but I know during lockdown they played the whole game, the whole 90 minutes.
I watched it.
It was on YouTube, and there's nothing else to do at that moment in time, and that was really cool because then you just because obviously on the highlights it's chopped together, so it kind of does feel like quick. But when you watch it in real time, and actually the one thing that it's nothing like it, but bear with me for it, was the kind of Oxford City game a few weeks ago where we were in injury time and you're kind of stood there being like, what a wasted opportunity, can't believe we've done this. And literally 10 minutes later, you're on top of the world.
Yeah.
Everyone's hugging each other, going crazy. Everyone's leaving the ground, singing the songs and stuff. And you're like, just in that such a short period of time, things can flip, and momentum and anything in football like that. It's just crazy how you can go from kind of the lows to the highs, and that's why the playoffs are fun, right? So Torquay won't have had that, but you'd probably always rather win the league than rather take the risk to go into the playoffs and get that. But I guess that's something quite fun about playoffs, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing, and I think had we won the league, then obviously it would have been an even bigger achievement for Douse, an even bigger achievement for the club and the players involved. But it would have denied us that moment. It would have denied us one of my favourite moments in recent memory. And there's so many things like that. I mean, people call them sliding doors moments. I'm a big fan of those things that could have gone the other way. And I mean, maybe that's a conversation you and I can have another time. But there have been many, many over the years. What if we'd signed Grazioli permanently? What if the season in COVID hadn't ended when it did? What if we'd beaten, I think, Barnet the night before it ended? We would have had a playoff place. How would that have affected the history of the? All these questions. I've seen it on people ask the same questions on Cardsport. But yeah, it is about the moment. So I think when you support a club at any level that isn't winning everything every year, that isn't winning trophies every year, that isn't kind of in the headlines on telly being successful, you do cling on to these moments. And I think over the course of the fact it was so difficult for me to pick 3 games out of 26 years of watching the club is just testament to the fact that not because the games were particularly good, like on the pitch, it was everything else around them. It was staying up. It was, in the case of the trophy, winning the trophy. In the case of Wealdstone, it was somehow beating a team, having been down and out 15 minutes before and committing one of the biggest burglaries in the history of the National League South, probably. Yeah, it's all about the big moments. And that's one thing I love about supporting this club. You never know where the next one's going to come from. Didn't see us beating Hartlepool 3-2 earlier this season when we were 2-0 down. The red card changed everything, and as much as I have fond memories of Darren Searle being our manager, it was really, really nice to sort of rub it in his face, beat him 3-2, and then we know what happened thereafter. Things didn't quite go to plan, but yeah, moments.
Yeah, exactly. As you say, even stuff like you're saying, just going to football and stuff that won't be seen as probably big moments, but they are to individual people, I guess. So I was thinking of one, even that season, the first one after COVID. I think relatively early in that season, we went away to Notts County. It's like one of the first away days I'd done. Maybe it's later in the season, I can't even remember, but it was like the first kind of like proper one I'd done since COVID, and you'd been kind of denied that for really a couple of years, and then we won. I think we won like 4-1 up there or something, and it was just like, what an amazing day.
Yeah.
And you're kind of at a proper stadium, and it's just that things just felt proper. And it was just like, this is just, we've missed this so much. And obviously to anyone else that doesn't go that often, it's like, oh, cool result, but why is it such a big thing? It's like, well, because if it's your life and you go that much, it's going to be such a big thing. So no, 3 very good picks. So obviously my kind of final question to you would be, obviously we've talked about these kind of big games, big moments. I mean, and keeping belief, I guess, going into Saturday's game. Obviously, we've got a big one on Tuesday first, but then going into the Aldershot game on Saturday. I mean, what are your thoughts there? Because I think that's going to be a nervy game, similar to the Wealdstone one, where maybe if you go behind, you're thinking this is the worst thing ever. But I don't know whether to be nervous or excited.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rochdale, the league game, if you ask me now, would I rather have 3 points against Rochdale or lose to Aldershot? Would I take 3 points if it meant losing to Aldershot? Yes. I'd rather win on Tuesday night and lose the FA Trophy semi-final. I know that'll make me unpopular. I'm not saying it because I'm like Adrian Durham trying to be controversial. League status at all costs. I think another win Tuesday will get us that little bit closer to safety. But I think it's possible to have both. Do I think we have a chance against the Shots? Well, Rochdale showed us that they're not machine, they're man, they bleed, as Rocky Ford once said. And I think we've got every chance. Aldershot have got a bit of a purple patch recently, but they are infallible. We have got players coming back. I'm secretly hoping that Matt Ward's going to be fit, although the murmurings I heard on Saturday would tell me that he's probably not going to be. So that's a big loss. But then a chance for the new signings to make their mark. You're a game from Wembley. Those however many thousand fans are going to go to the Rec on Saturday. It's a huge, huge chance to make some noise, to intimidate, and get back to Wembley. The one thing I was really pleased about was that it wasn't Aldershot in Wembley. They did the draw at Talksport Towers with Aaron McLean, who will be known to viewers, people who watch National League on telly on DAZN and BT Sport and TNT and such like. And I said, if you pick out I don't know what would be worse, you picking out Aldershot in the semis or the chance of us meeting them at Wembley, because I couldn't enjoy that. Being knocked out in the semis I can live with, but losing to the Shots at Wembley, it makes my palms sweat thinking about it. The unbeaten record going to them. And I just thought, no, not for me. So whatever happens, I'm pleased that they can't beat us at Wembley. I think we've got every chance. I feel better after Saturday. I'll hopefully feel better after Rochdale that we can do a number on them. And we shall see. But if you were to ask me right now, would I rather win the FA Trophy or stay up? I think most reasonable people would say stay up. You don't get to go to Wembley that often, but with all the new investment, with the new manager, Neil Ardley, I think it's important that we do play at the highest level. I think it's important that if there is going to be fresh money coming into the club, we're at the highest possible level. And the fact that heading into the Rochdale game, if we win, we'll be 12 points off the playoffs. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second that we're going to mount a late charge and go up, but it just shows you how, 4 more wins out of the last, however many games you played, 39, and we'd have been contending for the playoffs again. That's how close it is. However bad a season we've had, we're not actually that far off it in a weird way. So I'd much rather stay up than win the FA Trophy. But that's not to say I don't want both. And I do believe we can do both. And that starts at Aldershot on Saturday.
Yeah, as you say, you could obviously win the semi-final, then lose in the final, and all have been relegated by then. So it's a difficult one. And I guess with Aldershot, if they did beat us, it's very realistic that they could just go and lose to Rochdale, who they lost to very recently in the final, and then they would never bring it up again. We would never bring it up again, and we can all just move on. Obviously, unfortunately, we do play them at home in the league in between the trophy and the final.
That's the other thing. Sorry to interrupt you. I could happily lose on Saturday and then batter them at our place on Easter Monday. Like, not a problem. Go out the FA Trophy. I'm denying 20,000 Woking fans a chance to go to the new Wembley and see us in a major competition final for the first time since 2006. First time we've been to Wembley since 1997. But the opportunity to beat Aldershot in the league at our place would be so much more satisfying, because there's been many, many games that I've been to where we haven't done that. And one of my least favourite ever games was a 2-1 defeat back in 2004. Justin Richards got sent off for kicking the advertising hoardings. The ref was an absolute clown. He actually ended up in prison for reasons I won't go into now, but it is a matter of public record. And yeah, I went away thinking, why do they always get the better of us? But this season, one would hope we'll have the last laugh.
Yes, no, exactly. Well, it'll just be exciting either way, won't it? When there's a big interest going on between the clubs and local football and all of these things, it is good. And we have kind of turned the tide a bit. I think we were at some stage, I think we were talking about this with Glenn on Cast the other day, but I think they had 9 victories or 9 league victories in a row against us, and then we beat them on the 10th. Because I just remember, I think Celtic used to sing 10 in a row about winning the league, mainly because Rangers went bust and had to go to the bottom and come up again. But still, they used to sing it. I think that they run 10 in a row, or they were going to win 10 in a row. I can't remember how it all ended up in the end. But I was like, if they managed to get 10 league victories back to back, that's A, crazy, and B, like, we'll never hear the end of it. But then once the duck got broken, it's kind of been a lot more even since then. So I think thankfully we've signed a lot of ex-Aldershot players who now don't really seem to be that intimidated going to play there, because they've played there before. Whereas before we used to fall apart there, get back to Kingfield, and then freeze at Kingfield and lose there as well. And that wasn't very much fun. There's only so many games you can go to where it's kind of the same thing unfolding. An ex-Woking player has scored against us in the 90th minute, and Aldershot have kind of stormed the barrier and gone crazy. And it's just like, how many times can this happen?
I mean that poor fence. I mean, if fences could talk, that one would tell a story, wouldn't it? How many times has that metal fence been knocked over the years? And you're right about ex-Woking players scoring against us. I mean, I will never forgive Scott Rendell ever for what he did. Innie Effiong's obviously back, and he's our hero and everything else. And even Reece Brown playing at Barnet, you know, the limited impact he had for us with the injuries in Sal's second season. And then he goes and scores the goal against us a couple of weeks ago. You look, Barnet were always probably going to beat us in the shape we were in then. But I really want some of our players to start really dishing it out to their former clubs. And again, like Innie Effiong Saturday, the stage is yours, son. The stage is yours.
I think what a brilliant note to end it on. So thank you, Ben, for your time. Who knows if we do this in the future, Saturday, or us winning the trophy, or staying up on the last day of the season. It's all still out there, but hopefully it doesn't get that tense for us. But thank you for joining us. It's been great. I'd say people can go and find your work, but just tune into the Talksport Drive bulletins and you'll hear Ben's voice, or find you on Twitter. I guess, what's your Twitter handle or X handle?
X, yeah, or Twitter if you're old school. I'm at Ben A Fletcher, at Ben Fletcherism on Insta.
And the reason he's really scared everyone is because he was telling Aaron McLean we were going to relegate Aldershot and beat them in the trophy. So he's playing it down now. But there's a lot at stake at Talksport Towers.
There is. There's a few Woking fans. I should just say, I'm not the only Woking fan at Talksport Towers. There's a few of us. A couple of producers, Connor and Andrew. Adrian Durham was at the Halifax game the other night with Jim Proudfoot, one of our commentators. There is a real consort of Woking fans. So when people say to me, like, what do you do for your club? I've managed. I don't think there's another non-league club with as many mentions as Woking. So don't worry about that. I'm flying the flag. I'm flying the flag.
Yeah, no, we'll have Deck as well, Declan McCarthy on.
Deck, of course,
he does a great job. Yeah, you didn't mention him, so I thought I'd got him in, so he's not heartbroken by that. But we'll probably have him on one of these as well. His era of watching us is probably very different to yours, so we'll get some different games. But thank you very much, Ben, and we'll see you again next time.
Cheers, Jacob.